This is a TalkStation original podcast.
Our guest is Sheriff Asa Buck, retiring Sheriff Asa Buck. He's too young to retire professionally, but he is. And he is not a retiring kind of individual, which he is not either. He is he's outgoing, but it's always a pleasure to have him joining us this afternoon here on Viewpoints. We're talking with him about the, air quotes here, the announced retirement scheduled for later in June, as a matter of fact. Not really a big surprise in light of the fact that he kind of broke that story here on the talk station back in, I think it was January, when he announced he was running for U.S. Congress. And at that time, he announced that he was going to be stepping down. And, well, true to form and to his word, he is, in fact, yes, stepping down. Wow. Hey, with that said, Sheriff, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Good afternoon, Lockwood. Glad to be with you as always.
Well,
like you said, we've had many discussions over the years, and glad to be on with you again, of course.
This is going to touch on one of those items here because it's something I'm very proud of. The activity that you and I engaged in back in, 2009, 2010, somewhere in that vicinity, and we spent a lot of time on this radio's program talking about something that really impressed you, and you were working, as a matter of fact, I would argue you were on the cutting edge of, and that was opioid addiction, the prescription addictions, and of course now beyond that, all the work that you've done in that field as well by aiding the addicts, and also I might add, going after the providers. But before we get into all of that, let's talk about Asa Buck and his experience as Sheriff of Carteret County, now concluding 20 years of service. That's really kind of stunning. So how did you get into the whole activity of being in law enforcement? What's your background? Why did you do it? And what's a little background to the individual that is now Sheriff of Carteret County?
Well, I remember when I was in high school, nearing the end of my high school career, and planning to go to East Carolina University. And of course, you have to pick a major. Mm-hmm. And I had always had some interest in law enforcement. Didn't ultimately know what I would end up doing, but I majored in criminal justice at East Carolina University, and considered a number of different things, throughout my time in college. And I was kind of looking at the SBI or maybe some federal agencies, or even kind of thought about maybe going to law school. I mean, you think about many different things. And I actually did my internship during my last semester of college here with the sheriff's office. I had a number of friends who were deputies at the time, and so ended up doing my internship here. And after 2 or 3 months of doing that, I decided that, I thought it would be pretty neat to at least start my career here working in the sheriff's office alongside, people that I knew and had grown up with. Of course, growing up here in Carteret County all my life, the sheriff was Ralph Thomas.
Mm-hmm. Right.
At that time, it would have been Ralph Thomas Jr., and of course, his father was sheriff for 20 years before him.
Right.
And so my entire life I'd always heard about Ralph Thomas being the sheriff. And, everybody always liked the sheriff. They liked the deputies and just kind of the way they did business, and, kind of the philosophy of, working and trying to help people, not just trying to catch somebody doing something wrong, that type of thing. And, everybody always kind of held the deputies in high regard, and the guys the people that I knew at that time who were deputies down here, I was really interested in that, kind of wanted to be part of that team. And so I let Sheriff Thomas know that I wanted to come work here in the sheriff's office, and thankfully, very grateful that he hired me. He actually put me to work as a bailiff even before I went to BLET. And I started working as a bailiff in the courthouse and took the basic law enforcement training. And about a month after I graduated from BLET, he put me on the road in the patrol division, and started working as a deputy out on patrol. Then a couple of years I was promoted to sergeant, and then a couple of years after that I was promoted to shift lieutenant. And then in May of 2005, he called a bunch of us together and let us know that he was planning to announce his retirement. And I think that was probably on a Wednesday or a Thursday. And the following Monday, I was out knocking on doors campaigning.
Wow.
And Sheriff Thomas, he was well known for having gone out and going door to door, meeting the people, asking them for their support. And I did the same thing. I knew that was a winning model, and not just to do it just to win, but to go out and meet the people and hear their concerns and talk to them a little bit about you, but mostly listen to what they have to say. I mean, we serve the people.
Right.
We've got to listen to what they have to say, not just what we want to tell the people as candidates and things like that. And so, it's well-known history. I campaigned. I went door to door for 18 months, 1 year out from the primary election, 18 months out from the general, and had very good showing in the elections, in the primary and in the general, and took over in December of 2006. And that's kind of the backstory on how I ended up being the sheriff of the county.
I want to get into the aspect of how a sheriff responds to a community, because it is unique. It's an elected office. A lot of people look at it as being a department within the county, but you are a standalone office as well. But I want to touch on one other issue. This is probably one of the more sensitive aspects of your job, and that is within a year or so after your election as sheriff, you had the unpleasant experience of having to actually take your predecessor. You had to deal with him and several of your staff on drug charges, as I recall. Well,
I was, it was either the first day or the second day I was presented with some information. And I called my chief deputy at the time in my office, which is Ken Raper. He's now our clerk of court. He and I had a discussion, and of course, coming into office, wanting to focus on new things and being excited about getting going, we were presented with some information, and we contacted the district attorney, Scott Thomas, and then from there an investigation ensued, which lasted for a few years, involved some state agencies and federal law enforcement agencies, and ultimately some charges were brought, which was, certainly not a good thing, and it wasn't, something that I anticipated having to deal with, and it really kind of put a damper on the getting going down here.
Right.
But it was done. It was something that was brought to light. I've always been guided by doing the right thing, and we did that, and it was dealt with, and we've all got past it. There was some things I remember back in those days where, obviously, anytime somebody does something in law enforcement that casts a negative light,
right,
that's not a good thing. But you continue to show people that you do things for the right reason, in the best way you know how to do them, and people will continue to support you. So that was a little bump in the road, but it wasn't anything that sidelined us and that type of thing, and we moved on.
Well, I just want to make comment of the fact, and of course, it involved the previous sheriff and several deputies, and they, as a result, did get charged, and they were not only accused, but charged and were found guilty. But to your point, you moved on, and you moved on quickly. And did that in any way, the way you experienced that, did that in any way shape your career as sheriff for the remainder of your term?
Well, I think it showed very, very soon that, I was about doing the right thing for the right reason. And, look, when you're in this business, and especially when you're local, the whole time I was a deputy sheriff, I worked the eastern part of the county, and that's where most of my family and friends and, people I'd grown up with. And when you're in the law enforcement business, you have to enforce the law against everybody. And, I've always been a believer of feeding people out of the same spoon. Not showing favoritism and that type of thing. And, you don't treat people differently based on who they are, where they come from, that type of thing. I don't believe in living in a police state either. Don't get me wrong. It's not like, I'm not saying you go out and write everybody a speeding ticket because they're going 4 miles an hour over the speed limit. I don't believe in that. That's not my law enforcement philosophy. But people do things, and they're serious offenses, and you have victims involved and things like that. I mean, you don't. There's no favoritism.
Okay.
And I think law enforcement has had a, in some things you always hear, well, somebody swept something under the rug, or this or that or the other. Things like that might have gone on back in the old days. I'm not saying they didn't, because I'm pretty sure they probably did. That was a long time before I came around. But that's not the way you do. And, if people do things, and you got to be held accountable for them.
Right.
And, if you do to one, you got to do to the other. Like I say, you treat everybody the same. Everybody's on the same playing field. You feed people out of the same spoon. And that's just the way it's got to be. I pretty much proved that very early on, and have continued to do that ever since.
Let's talk about several things. And you mentioned something a few moments ago that caught my attention. I had forgotten about it. You are a Republican sheriff, very successful, ran very successfully in those 20 years. You worked with the Department of, the local district attorney, Scott Thomas, who was, by the way, and I'm just going to bring it up because it's just, it says something about how you worked with others. But the district attorney, Scott Thomas, who was a Democrat, long Democrat pedigree in his family, but you two worked extremely well together, and you worked very successfully on some major programs. But I want to touch on one of them related to the issue of drugs, and that leads me to another topic as well. But let's start with your relationship with the district attorney and the state attorney general's office and things of this nature. You had a very close relationship. Politics did not enter that.
Exactly, Lockwood. I mean, politics had absolutely zero to do with District Attorney Thomas and I working together. And, I remember when I was going around knocking on doors campaigning the first time, people would ask me my political affiliation. I'd say, well, I'm a Republican, but when a deputy pulls in your yard, they don't ask you how you're registered to vote. They're there to help.
Right.
And, law enforcement and public safety should not be political. And it really wasn't political for many years. That's really only kind of a fairly new thing in the whole scheme of things, where law enforcement hasn't become political, but some of the aspects that law enforcement is called to do have become political, which, so you have some DAs in some counties, and they're liberal counties, so you have some liberal DAs and even some sheriffs that aren't quite as, conservative and law and order as most of the rest of us and that type of thing. But as far as our DA and I working together, I mean, I'm really very proud of what Scott and I did together over so many years, and he was just a perfect partner to work with. And I think he would say the same thing about me and the other sheriffs.
Right.
We didn't just kind of do the daily, you investigate a case, make an arrest, they prosecute. Scott and I really got out on the tip of the spear in really trying to bring awareness and attention to, back in those days, what was the situation with prescription drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And people becoming addicted and then violating the law, not because they were bad people, but because they had become addicted to these substances. And so we were trying to bring awareness as to the dangers of overprescribing, overuse of, and misuse of prescription drugs, and all the negative downside that came out of that, which was involvement in criminal activity oftentimes, overdosing, and even death. We had overdoses and deaths back in those days, nothing like dealing with fentanyl, but it was a lot more than we had ever dealt with regard to other illegal street drugs. And so, Scott and I, we were kind of going around talking to groups, trying to do what we could in the media, and just bringing awareness to the devastating effects that were being felt in our counties, and how it was affecting public safety and everything all the way around, law enforcement, our courts, our jails, the types of cases that had to be prosecuted, the people who had been victimized. And so we worked a lot over the years to try to get things changed. And, Scott ended up being the president of their DA's association. I became president of the Sheriff's Association. We continued all this work, served on any number of different boards and committees, served on the Attorney General's task force for opioids. and got some legislation changed, which curbed a lot of the prescribing practices and different things. Got access for local law enforcement officers to the controlled substance reporting system so we could better investigate doctor shopping cases. Really made a big difference in that area. We started focusing very heavily on trying to help people who had found themselves in addiction and involved in the criminal justice system, not just prosecuting them, but trying to help them get towards and utilize recovery resources to help to get their lives back on track, which was positive in any number of different ways, certainly to the person involved, society in general, and helping to work on the jail population.
Right.
Because a lot of people who are breaking the law because of their addictions, they don't just come to jail one time. It's a continual cycle. And so you get somebody out of your jail, which is already overcrowded to start with, and send them to recovery programs. And if they successfully complete those programs and they get their lives back on track, they're no longer using drugs, breaking the law, they don't come back to jail at taxpayer expense, and they're not victimizing people. So, it reduced recidivism, it reduced rates of return back to our county jail. Many of these folks have gone on to get into recovery and get back to leading productive lives, which is good for them and society in general. And, it's been a win-win-win all the way around. But if you're a sheriff, you have to have a good partner who is in charge of your district attorney's office, because we all have people who carry out the daily duties, but the leaders at the top are the ones who have to decide what's our philosophy going to be, how are we going to focus our resources, what's majorly important that we need, because you can't do everything. You have to focus on the things that are important and go after those things and try to do those things very well. And so District Attorney Thomas was a fantastic partner with me. I oftentimes get a lot of credit for a lot of things, but you got to spread it around. One man or woman can't do anything on their own. You have to have good partnerships in order to be able to get things accomplished. So that's been a wonderful thing. And Scott retired last year, but we had that opportunity to work together almost all that entire time to get things done and make things better in our communities.
We're talking with Sheriff Asa Buck and about his retirement, but also look back at his career. Several things I want to make mention of: the media work that you did to promote awareness on the issue of opioid addiction. You and I talked every Monday for several months, and I've got to brag on you. It's painful, but I will do it anyhow. I know of one instance where we were talking to a young lady who pointed directly at you and said, because of you, you saved her life, because you had her incarcerated. You talked to her mother, who was frustrated, and you said, the only way you're going to be able to help this your daughter is if you take charge. And you had her incarcerated. She went through drug rehab and is very productive now in society and very successful in her business, and I applaud that. The other aspect of this, and this goes to your endeavors, I'm going to jump on three items. One, the pill collection. You had the annual pill collection. That was one of the first that was done in the state, if not the first. You were one of the first sheriff's offices in the state to have Narcan in every vehicle. And you worked with the various addictive services to get to your point a few moments ago. Let's talk about that. How the pill collection process, was this the first county in the state to do that?
Yes, we were the very first. Back in 2008, I went to all the police chiefs in the county and said, look, we need to find a way to reduce access and availability of all these drugs. And, the only thing I can think of is have these people come turn this stuff over to us. And I knew these medications were in people's homes, even when they didn't need them anymore, because I was a deputy going around taking reports where people were breaking in houses or stopping by to see somebody, quote unquote, and then they go raid their medicine cabinet. And so, we did that, and the public obviously knew it was a situation as well because they supported it. And the very first one we did was very successful, so we did another one, and then we've been doing them ever since. And, and then others started doing the program, and then the state ended up modeling the program that we started here. And the last number I saw, the state of North Carolina's collected 448 million dosage units of prescription drugs. And
Wow.
it all started right here in Carteret County.
I think that. Okay, we'll leave it right there. You don't even have. We can just sign off right on that one. All right.
Yeah.
Narcan. You were first or second sheriff's office in the state to incorporate Narcan in every car?
Well, not in the state.
Okay.
I remember going to a conference, and it was kind of talked about that some of these sheriffs were doing that. A number of them had started doing that in the western part of the state.
Right.
And so when I came home, I said, well, this is a good idea. And because oftentimes a law enforcement officer may actually be able to get to a call,
right.
in this case, talking about overdoses, maybe even before the rescue squad. And so, when I got back home, I said, hey, we're going to do this. And I think we were probably one of the first, in the eastern part of the state to do it. And here again, I got with the police chiefs. I said, look, here's what we're going to start doing. I think it'd be a good idea. And most of us, put Narcan in our patrol vehicles, and that way, if an officer or a deputy got to the call, they could administer the first dose or two of Narcan. And then when fentanyl started coming along, it was extremely important because oftentimes you have to have multiple doses
right.
to revive somebody. A lot of people have been revived and had their lives saved because the deputy sheriff or police officer got there even before the rescue squad, which in dealing with fentanyl overdoses, time is critical.
Right.
I mean, just a minute or two could make the difference if you even get the opportunity to help in that regard because fentanyl is so powerful. And so, I'm very proud that we did that. Of course, we put Narcan everywhere. I say we put it in the
in schools. You put it everywhere.
The courthouse, the jailhouse, and the schoolhouse.
Right.
And one of my SROs revived a boy at one of our local schools several years ago with having that Narcan at the schoolhouse.
Right. All right.
And so it's been an important thing to do.
Well, and then the other high point, and we're going to touch on one last item, and that is being the jail itself. But the other high point is the work you did related to electronic monitoring and also giving opportunities. You touched on that a few moments ago in your conversations about your experience with Scott Thomas. But that is another thing that you have been a leader in, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of that develop more and more over the years. I remember when I first got involved in law enforcement, I didn't really hear a whole lot of talk about recovery and trying to help people get into recovery. We started seeing a lot of things like LEAD, where, the arrest diversion and jail diversion and things like that. And so a lot of that developed over time. And, here again, you look and see things that seem to make common sense and work towards, workable solutions. And that always seemed to me to be a pretty good idea. I mean, if you got people why are people coming to your jail?
Right.
Most of the time, due to substances, drugs and alcohol. And so if those people continue in those continual problems at home, they're going to continue coming back to your jail. If you can help and link people to those services, and then they get off of those substances and they go back to living productive lives, then you're having fewer people come to your jail. You're cutting down on those repeat offenders and those repeat visits. They're not going out and creating new victims. They're not going out committing new crimes. They're not getting messed up in their car and causing an accident and killing somebody out here on the street. That only made common sense to do those types of things. And here again, had a willing and able partner in helping in that regard, because you can't just lock people up and solve the problem. Oftentimes that might be you need to do that because that's the impetus to help to get that person to change their life and also exercise some accountability over them. And, you give them the opportunity to do right. If they don't do right, then they come back to jail. Right. It's not a get out of jail free card. It's an opportunity. Those who go on and become successful in those recovery programs, they're given some consideration on their cases in court, which almost every case is dealt with by plea bargains and things like that anyway. So that's not a new or novel concept. But for those who go on and do well, they get on probation. They don't mess up on probation. They've proven that they've changed their lives and changed their activity. You can just put people in jail or send them to prison. That in and of itself doesn't always take care of the problem. It's a part of it. But, you got to look at all different aspects. You got to look at the whole pie, not just one slice of it. I'm very proud of what we've been able to do in that regard. And we've helped a lot of people turn their lives around get into recovery, and go back to living productive lives. And society has benefited, in general for it.
I want to go back to the topic here for a moment of the jail. This is a sensitive issue because jails are facilities that we send people to, and as the general populace, we forget about. You've worked hard. The jail that that you've been using now for 20 years is a little crowded, and you've mentioned that several times. What is your observation about the whole issue of incarceration and jail?
When it kind of comes up as far as the discussion of building a jail, and I've heard for years, building a jail is not a popular thing, that type of thing.
Right.
But I've often told people, you think about driving down the highway, what keeps everybody from driving 100 miles an hour down the road today? Two things: a speed limit sign and somebody who might be running a radar who might write you a ticket, and you get some kind of negative return on that.
Right.
You get a ticket, you got to pay a fine, you got to go to court, you drive too fast,
and your insurance goes up. And your insurance goes up. Yeah.
The county jail is the most important building in this county. The jail and the courthouse. They're the two most important buildings in this county for maintaining law and order and a civil society. Sometimes people don't think about that. They just think, well, that's a jail. That's just where bad people go to get locked up, whatever. The county jail, the magistrate's office, and the courthouse is what keeps the overwhelming majority of people in line. You have people who choose to break the law. You have people who choose to break a lot of bad laws, and they get a bad consequence.
Mm-hmm.
But for almost all the rest of us, we're all guided by the fact that we don't want to go to the magistrate's office for 5 minutes, much less go to the magistrate and then get put in the county jail, got to spend the night in jail, then go to court, and then go back to court. These buildings in our society, our criminal justice system, is built this way for a reason. We have a civil society, a peaceful society. We live in a free society, but you have to have certain things in place in order to maintain a civil society. You have to have some authority, some level of authority, and things to keep people from doing just anything that they want to do. Most human beings are good people, but everybody's got a little bit of a streak. Our founding fathers knew that. You could have the best people in the world, but if people are left to their own devices to do whatever they want to do, you're going to have something bad come from it. The county jail is extremely important, and you have to have a jail that is of adequate size to be able to keep up with what's going on in the criminal justice system. The building we sit in was designed in the late 80s, early 90s, and came online in 1995. Well, that was 30 years ago plus. The jail at that time was not designed with any thought of expansion in the future. It's a poor design. It's not good. It's not very staff to inmate ratio numbers. There's any number we can sit here and talk for two programs on the county jail. But anyway, the current facility is not big enough to house them. We've been housing inmates in other jails. There's only 116 beds in this jail. I've got probably 160 plus inmates in custody right now. I've got 70 people who are not in jail who are out on electronic monitoring, that program we started years ago. So if you took that 50 or 60 or 70 people and put them back in an already overcrowded jail, we'd be well over 200 people in a jail with 116 beds. This is not going to go away, and it's not going to shrink. The county is growing. We continue to have issues, and you have to have a place to be able to bring people. Not everybody who comes to jail stays a long time. A lot of people come, stay a day, spend the night, spend the weekend. But people who are committing major crimes and felonies and serious offenses in our county, you have to have a place to put them, whether it's for a short stay or for a long stay. This jail just is not big enough, has not been big enough, the entire time I've been in office. And that has been a serious challenge, which has affected our ability and our daily operations, the things we have to work for, plan for, budget for. The jail's just not big enough, and it has to be expanded. That's just the truth of the matter. Our commissioners have been struggling with that over the years, and the current board is looking at that. And I feel confident that in time they'll get around to doing something to expand the facility.
The ability for the jailers your staff to have be able to see all of the individuals, the inmates, the tenants, if you will, and being able to respond in cases of an emergency, which happens from time to time. And the other aspect is the facilities available for ladies, for women inmates. You know, that jail was never really, back when it was built, women were not often arrested. But unfortunately, that has increased, has it not?
That was something that changed. Yeah, this bed was designed with the jail was designed with cells for 10 females.
Wow.
For many years, we've had 30 plus female inmates in custody in this facility, and we actually had to kind of rework the design, not the design, but rework how we allocated inmates in the facility to accommodate the larger number of female inmates, because we couldn't just send them out to other jails because other jails weren't holding the female inmates.
Right.
You know, that's the other thing. People say, well, if you can just house inmates in other jails, just do that. Well, that sounds simple, but there's a lot more to it than that when it comes down to actually doing it. Those other jails have to have bed space.
Mm-hmm.
And do they hold males or do they hold females? And if you have problem inmates, they're not going to keep those inmates. They're going to send those inmates back to you. And it costs a lot of money. We've spent millions of dollars housing inmates in other county jails. And, these other places, they build new jails. They rent out that bed space. Right. They've been generating revenue to pay for their new facilities, and we've been helping to pay for them. So, you're not getting any return on your investment if you're just giving somebody else all that money. But the money is one thing, but there's just so much work and other things involved in arranging those transports, getting those people back here. And it has a negative effect on the court system, too, in being able to move those cases. If you've got 10 or 15 inmates housed in a different county jail or across eastern North Carolina, you don't just call and say, hey, send Joe Smith over here. We're going to handle this case in court today and go ahead and get it taken care of. That doesn't happen if they're in another jail. It's just a situation that continues to build upon itself and just continues to make the problem worse. Moving jail cases through the system is important to keeping your jail population down. But if you have a significant number of your inmates housed in other jails, that has a negative effect on that, and you're not able to move those cases, which keeps those people in custody longer at taxpayer expense. You see what I'm saying?
No,
so the facility is just not adequate for current needs. It hasn't been adequate for past needs, and it sure as heck isn't adequate for future needs.
Asa, looking at the work that you've done over the years, and of course the issue of the jail, I think, is something that you've been working on very cautiously, and I just say that out of my own experience with you, and the opportunity to expand the facility. The county has in fact purchased property. There is movement in that direction. Are you feeling positive now about this, in spite of the fact that you're leaving right when we're probably going to introduce an opportunity to build the structure? Do you feel good about that?
Yes, I think the commissioners are moving ahead to do something with regard to the jail. I mean, and it's not just the jail; it's the sheriff's office as well. We've outgrown the building. I have staff we're in rented space for other staff in other places. We need to get everybody back together in one building. The jail and the sheriff's office need to be on the same property. We need to have adequate space to do things. And but obviously the jail itself is the most critical part of that. And so I feel very confident that things are moving in the right direction.
You have, as a matter of fact, tapped now John Nyberg as your replacement, at least for the temporary moment. He has been tapped by the Republican Party to be the nominee for the sheriff's office coming up in November. And I know that there is there are two other candidates, an independent and a Democrat. But looking at just setting the political issue aside, looking at your replacement, John Nyberg, who takes office, basically been filling in preparation for this, starting June 1, your feelings about his abilities and experience?
Well, when I made my announcement to run for Congress, I endorsed John Nyberg in the same statement.
Right.
And John was really the reason that I felt comfortable in, because I had to choose one or the other. I couldn't. The timing wasn't such that I could run for Congress, and if things didn't work out, I'd continue my term as sheriff. I had to pick one or the other. So having John in place was really what gave me the confidence to be able to do that and take that chance to run for Congress. I would not have decided to do something else or retire and just kind of leave things in a lurch with the sheriff's office here. We had too much invested to
Right.
just walk away and just whoever just come in here and do whatever, because obviously you have no control of that. But John has a tremendous background in law enforcement. I mean, to start with, he's a tremendous person. He's a great man. He's a man of faith. He's got 30 years, retired out of the Highway Patrol as a captain. Tremendous administrative experience that he gained through that process. And people who know John and work for John and with John, everybody likes him. He's just a consummate law enforcement professional. And a lot of people get in law enforcement. A lot of people like. There's also a lot of people that get in our business that everybody don't necessarily like them, or they might not necessarily be good leaders, or that type of thing. But I've known John for many, many years before he ever came to work to the sheriff's office, and he has a tremendous background, and people know him and they like him. But his administrative experience has been a tremendous help to me here in the sheriff's office. He's been here for 10 years.
Wow.
He started in our jail as basically my second in command in the jail, as one of our jail lieutenants under the jail administrator. Mm-hmm. And he used those skills, has done a fantastic job helping to run the jail, which is one of the most important aspects of the sheriff's office, of course. Mm-hmm. And then when my chief deputy, Franklin Fulcher, was looking to retire, I talked to John Nyberg about being my next chief deputy, which he's my third. And so for the past 2 years, he's been helping me run the day-to-day operations of the sheriff's office, the entire sheriff's office, the jail, civil process, overseeing court security, everything, you name it, drug enforcement, investigation of crimes, and so forth. People talk about candidates and things like that. John Nyberg, second to me, and I'm not going to be here much longer, he is the most qualified person in this county to be the next sheriff of the county. Come down, call your next witness. There is no question about it.
Okay.
And, I'm not saying anything negative about anybody else. Obviously, there was a primary. There's going to be a general election. I've endorsed him. Obviously, I didn't endorse him just because he worked for me or because we're friends or whatever. He is the most qualified person to be the sheriff of this county. And if you compare him to me 20 years ago, he's in a much better position to be the sheriff than I was way back then.
Wow.
I was 31 years old. I'd had a handful of years in law enforcement. I'd been a patrol deputy and a lieutenant. He's got a heck of a lot more experience starting out as sheriff than I did way back then. He's the reason I felt comfortable jumping out, leaving from here to run for Congress. That's the whole reason I did that to start with. I had fully intended on running for sheriff again. When people ask me how I feel about leaving, obviously it's bittersweet. I mean, I'm not happy about not being the sheriff anymore because this has been my passion for almost 20 years. Mm-hmm. But as far as leaving the sheriff's office in good hands and knowing that the person who's sitting in the chair I'm sitting in right this minute, as far as the decisions that have to be made and running the office and overseeing personnel issues and treating the deputies good, doing good to the people, I have full confidence in John Nyberg. And I'm just as happy as I can be. I don't think the situation could have worked out any better, to be honest with you.
What's your next iteration, Asa? What next?
Well, I get asked that a lot. And there's some things I'm looking at. I wish I could talk with you more about it right now, but right now I really can't.
Okay.
I don't like to be presumptuous, and I don't like to get the cart ahead of the horse. And but there's some things I'm looking at and considering. But anything that I do from here on in a professional basis, I certainly hope that it is meaningful and impactful to the people of our communities, Carteret County, Eastern North Carolina, or wherever. number one, I'm not looking to just go home and do nothing.
Well, I know you're not. I know you.
Yeah, I mean, I've learned a lot in my time as sheriff, and I've done what I've done because of a passion to do certain things. I didn't want to just come down here and sit here and just have a title and not really do much. I mean, I wanted to be here for a reason and to do things and be proactive and to make a difference. And so I still want to continue to do that, but I just kind of got to see where things are going to go.
Okay.
Something could come along in the short term. Something might be a little bit further down the road, and we'll see what happens. But
All right.
I'm hoping it'll be something in a public service area.
I want to thank our guest this afternoon, congratulate him on 20 years of service to the county, to the region, and to the state, and that is Asa Buck, Sheriff Asa Buck. And Asa, a pleasure. We have spent a lot of time together on this program, many hours. I think, as a matter of fact, you and Pastor Patrick Whaley are the two people that I have spoken to most. And I've been talking to Pastor Whaley now for 4 years on the issue of Ukraine. But you worked diligently on the area of addiction particularly, and I just want to congratulate you on your years of service. And thank you very much for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you for everything you've done for us over the years. I greatly appreciate it.